January 14th, 2016, Dead Reckoning Radio. I'm your host, Jay Friesen, sitting in with the good doctor, Brian Matson, and the always lovely, talented, and much smarter person than us, Hadley Heath from Denver. And if you're just joining us for the first time, what we do is we sit around this table and we discuss all the things that might have come through your news feed. And we discuss them from a distinctly Christian worldview. But we don't preach at you. At least we don't try to, because that would be not very interesting. Our sponsor today, again, is Alliance Defending Freedom, www.adflegal.org, defending your right to freely live out your faith. They have recently announced that Kansas governor has just defunded Planned Parenthood. Way to go, Kansas.
Sam Brown back.
It's not a bad thing. It's just a useless means of money when it can go somewhere else, and obviously Planned Parenthood doesn't need it. ADF has been behind a lot of the Planned Parenthood stuff, so jump online, adflegal.org, and give a shout out to them and thank them for supporting Dead Reckoning. On that note, please jump on iTunes if you subscribe to us on iTunes and rate us 5 stars, because we think we're worth 5 stars. You may think we're worth 3 or 4. That's fine. Regardless, rate us something, because that gets us into the algorithm systems, and then people start finding us on random
We will
searches.
accept nothing less than 5 stars. So give us 5 stars.
Right. So thank you for joining us. We are on the live stream right now. Actually, we're on live stream. We're live streaming on live stream. We're trying a new, you'll notice we're in color. We're trying a new software, a new live stream system that everybody seems to like better.
I was counting on everybody not seeing my pink shirt.
Too bad. So if you like us in color, let us know if you like us in color better than black and white. I don't really know. But yeah, joining us on the live stream, thank you for joining us if you have joined us, and subscribing to us on our various news outlets. All right, on to the show. Before I get started, Hadley, thank you for coming out last week for our giant photo shoot and actually being in the studio, because that was awesome.
Thank you. And we ought to give shout outs as well to Mike and Ben and Loretta, who helped make the photo shoot a success, and also Remley, our producer, who also acted as creative director for the photo shoot. So I think the photos turned out great, and we had a great team working on that.
I love Remley.
The photos, for those of you, I mean, we haven't put them up anywhere as a, hey, here's the DR photo shoot. For our viewers and our listeners, the idea of this photo shoot was to put together content for our promotional package for 2016. So you're going to be seeing a lot of these photos kind of rolling out as Remley puts together her awesome show advertisement branding content, on Twitter and Facebook. So we're pretty excited about it. It's going to be great.
But if you happen to go to our various social media accounts, you might actually see some of the results of that shoot.
That's
Because I've changed my banner, my Facebook banner, my profile. We all have basically the same profile picture. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Fantastic. Brian sold a sketchy car and the cops called him. That's just a funny story.
You want to hear the story?
Yeah, it's part of our quick takes.
No, I wasn't aware that was going to be part of the quick takes. Well, okay, so I had this roofing crew at my house. And they were immigrant workers. Whether they were legal or not was not up to me. I had a contractor subcontract out to them. And I had this car sitting in my driveway that I needed to sell and get rid of for, I don't know, $400 or something like that. So they offered to buy it, and so I sold it to them. Now, I have not sold a lot of cars in my life, so very naively.
Is this Merlin?
Yeah, this is the blue Mercury Sable. And so I very naively filled out the title and gave the gal the title. She gave me the money, and she drove off, unfortunately, with my license plates in the car. And the minute they left, I knew this is not the last I'm going to hear from this car. Okay, because she did not go down, as I predicted. She did not go down and register the car in her name. She drove the car with my plates. And so I got a call from the sheriff at about 9 o'clock at night last week, asking if I owned this particular vehicle, and I told him, no, I do not. When did you sell it? Well, it was October of 14. Well, it turns out, of course, whoever was driving the car, it wasn't the gal I sold it to, had been pulled over for DUI and then arrested because of drugs and all this stuff. So the gal shows up at my house.
You sold your car to a drug dealer.
So the gal shows up at my house. And she really needs my help because she needs to get her car out of the impound lot. And the guy at the impound lot is not going to give her the car because she is not the owner of this vehicle. And so she was asking my help. I did call down there, and Ray, the guy down at the impound lot, he did me a solid after I explained the situation to him. And he had lots of choice things to say that I can't repeat on a family program, such as this. Ray said he would just take off the plates and all my legal blankety blank would be taken care of, and if she registered the car, he'd release it to her. So that was the end of it. So when you sell your car, take the plates off. That's just like pro tip.
Don't buy a car from Brian because he sells his cars, obviously, or you drive drug dealer worthy automobiles. I don't know.
I don't know.
That's funny. Okay, so Powerball, guys. We had 3 winners. I don't know if all 3 of them have claimed it yet, but there was one in Florida, one in Tennessee, and the other in California. It reached $1.6 billion, which has been national history.
$1.6 billion.
Right. Hadley, is state-run lottery policy a good thing for the public?
Oh, man. I wish I had the statistic handy of, how much the actual payout will be for the winners, because as people probably already know, the government takes a huge chunk out of the winnings of any state-run lottery, and then they continue to tax the payout when people choose to have, because you can make a choice. You can have a big payout all at once at the beginning, or you can choose to have, an annual portion of your winnings given to you year over year. So, yeah, it raises a lot of money for the government. And some people think that this is a good way to raise money because it is voluntary. No one's forcing you to buy a lottery ticket. But on the other hand, this is an endorsement, really an encouragement from the state to participate in something like a lottery, which is gambling. It's not an honest way to earn money. It's not something that I personally think is it's a good kind of thing for people to participate in, especially when many of the people who buy lottery tickets are buying lottery tickets, not just one, not just, hey, this is for fun and I might win, but they really get their hopes up by spending way too much money on lottery tickets. And for people who are lower income, every lottery ticket that they buy, it's the same price that you or I might pay. And it's a larger portion of their income. So it's almost an even worse use of their limited resources. So I think when the state does make a lot of money off a lottery, they're essentially doing it on the backs of people who are low income, poor, making poor decisions, and getting their hopes up for something that is just extremely unlikely. Of course, there's a winner every once in a while. There's 3 winners in this case this year for one of the biggest sums ever, and it'll be life-changing for those people. But if you follow lottery winners, often they end up not being very happy people. You talk about happiness and money and how those things are related, and often it is people who feel that they've really earned their money that feel satisfied with their lives and feel happy with their earnings. It's not people who have ended up with a large sum, either inherited or won, that feel happy and satisfied with the resources they have available to them. So I don't think it's good policy.
My father-in-law said last night that if he was going to win it, he would take the cash out deal, which would be like $750 million.
Yeah.
He would give away 700.
Yeah.
And I think you only have to give away 2% to be like, so you'd be giving away like $5 million a year or some number he figured. And then he would live on $50 million. He's like,
well, how could
I can live on
you
$50
can't even
million.
spend $50 million.
No, it's
just
nuts.
That's more money than Hadley. That was extremely, as we've come to expect, that was extremely articulate. I concur absolutely with everything that you've said. And I think it's particularly sad that governments often advertise lotteries as a social good, so they'll say things like this is for the elderly, or this is for schools
education
and education and all that, to try to like make people feel good, right, about buying these tickets. And you're so right that many of the most desperate people are the ones who are spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars on lottery tickets when the amount gets high. And these are people who maybe don't even have their rent payment for next month covered. So these are the people getting hit hardest by that. If you've ever been, I don't know, most of our viewers or listeners or listeners probably don't live in states where there is legalized gambling, but we do. Right here in Montana, we have a casino on every corner. And if you ever spent any time in any one of those casinos, I think one of the saddest things are to see elderly people or low-income single moms sitting there in front of machines pumping hundreds of dollars into them. This is not a social good. This is probably really bad public policy. So I totally agree with you.
Good thoughts, guys. Good thoughts. We're going to jump, speaking of public policy, we're going to jump right into politics today. State of the Union. President Barack Obama delivered his final State of the Union address the other night, and I didn't even know it happened, so naturally I didn't watch it. I kind of ignore, I just tune out anything that Obama kind of does. But it does seem to be notable. So, Hadley, since you let off on quick takes, Brian, what's your take?
I don't even remember the speech or anything about it. Hadley, you know that picture that we took in our photo shoot where we were like sitting against the wall and I was like seriously, studiously reading a book and you were working on some paperwork and Jay was playing with a paper airplane?
Yeah.
I'm not surprised that he didn't watch the State of the Union, are you?
No.
I have all these toys
No,
to
you know
play
what?
with.
I didn't
It was
watch it
perfect.
either, though. I read the transcript because I'm, part of my job is being responsible for knowing what happened, knowing what he said. Interestingly, the news was covering, of course, the State of the Union address while some of our soldiers were being held captive in Iran. I know we're going to cover that topic later, but
Right.
It seemed like a real juxtaposition when the president was talking about how safe and powerful and how well off America is today compared to when he took office. And it seemed like, the evidence of reality was betraying him even as he spoke.
Mm-hmm.
But, some notable things from the president's speech, I really didn't appreciate what he said about the economy, because he said anyone who says our economy is not doing well is peddling fiction. And of course, this is his attempt at undermining his political opponents.
Mm-hmm.
But Americans feel exactly what the economy is doing. Whatever he says, if it doesn't accord with their reality, then they will be better judges of how their own personal economies are doing. And of course, you can use 1,000 different metrics to determine how our economy is doing. He might point to the unemployment rate. But when you look at the real unemployment rate, or you look at labor force participation, we've had maybe what we might call a fundamental transformation of America, which is what the president promised us. So it is, in a lot of ways, Americans are very disappointed, and I believe a lot of Americans are hopeless about the future, especially considering who might be our next leader. I was, with some friends, and I felt like raising a toast to the fact that this was President Obama's last State of the Union address.
Yeah.
But I can't say that I feel very confident about who will be giving the next State of the Union address. So it wasn't really a newsworthy speech. I will agree with some of my friends who are Democrats who said that this speech wasn't really for the nation. It was for a Democratic coalition, a speech to unify and encourage and get them
Galvanize.
excited. Yes, galvanize the Democratic base to come out for another Democratic president in hopes that many of his so-called policy achievements will not be reversed by a Republican president.
Yeah, don't worry, Hadley, because next year the State of the Union is going to be led by somebody who they call him the State of the Union machine. It's going to be
Hillary.
fabulous. It's going to be fabulous. He's the State of the Union. He's
Hillary.
a speech machine, and
gonna
it's
be
going to be
Hillary.
great. Yeah, I like you, Hadley, didn't watch the speech. I read it mostly because I'm tired of the voice, but. It's one of those. It's just sort of a classic. It's Barack Obama has a certain style, and it is anyone who doesn't agree with me is delusional, and it's sort of
Or they have bad motives and they're
right
evil,
or bad motives, and it's condescending, as though there's no good faith opposition to anything he thinks or believes, and that's just sad. He's been an abject failure at being the great uniter that he promised to be. He has been the divider in chief for a long time, and there's a lot of people very, very alienated from their country, as illustrated by the front runner for the GOP nomination, who is tapping into that alienation. Hopefully, however, GOP voters come to their senses soon, and find a more responsible candidate.
I'm not confident, frankly. If you want the State of the Union transcript, I am posting the link right into the chat window. At least I thought I did.
New technology, man. New technology.
I don't know. I've never used this before. This thing's pretty wild. So you guys will have to. It's a live stream thing. And don't forget to tell us whether you like us in color or black and white better. I mean, I haven't figured out how to do black and white on this yet, so it's all color. Speaking of State of the Union, it's also remarkable to some people. Now, I did have some friends in my Facebook timeline who thought Nikki Haley was completely off her rocker and decided to, say whatever, kind of like they do. But for once, the Republicans had a response that wasn't a total embarrassment. South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley stole the show. In fact, more people talked about Haley than Obama. So, guys, is she the GOP's next rising star? Will she join the ranks of Ryan, Rubio, and others and be part of an era of level-headed, diverse, strong conservative? You wrote this, huh, Brian?
I didn't
like
actually.
My intro?
No, I think Remley wrote that verbiage there, bud.
Strong conservative voices and shatter the image of old white guys that have been holding the party back from wider appeal. Ryan himself said it best. If you want to hear an inclusive leader who's visionary, who's got a path for the future, who's brought people together, who's unified, it's Nikki Haley. Where do you think this?
What do you think?
Where do you think this headed?
Hadley.
Well, I liked Matt Lewis's take, and his tweet right after the GOP response was, this goes to show just how far apart the party of Trump is from the party of Ryan and Haley. And it's a sad thing, but it's true that Republicans are very divided. I think Ann Coulter's tweet response to Nikki Haley was, we should deport Nikki Haley. Who is an Indian American governor of South Carolina.
If Ann Coulter supported me for anything, that would be scary.
I know. On the radio today, Ann Coulter doubled down and called her a bimbo.
Wow.
Ooh.
Wow.
A bimbo.
So,
ouch.
Not just a little racist, but maybe a little sexism to go with that racism.
Ann Coulter needs to retire.
Oh,
She's
man.
not going
So,
anywhere.
I do think that there were some bad spots in Haley's response. I mean, no response is perfect. And let me just say for the record, it's a very difficult job to purport to speak for the GOP right now. I don't care what position that you're in, you're going to get some friendly fire, and you're going to get fire from the other side too. And I thought overall, Governor Haley did an excellent job. I think that it was unnecessary for her to discuss who's to blame for the division in politics right now, because I think that listeners at home have their own understanding and can make their own judgment about that. She said, there's plenty of blame to go around, and Republicans need to face the reality that we too are to blame. And I think in saying that, she was trying to appeal to moderate or disengaged voters. But I think that the best parts of her speech were later, when she was laying out the conservative agenda, and when she was saying, we don't need to follow the angriest voices. I'm glad she said that. Personally, I don't think that it was very smart strategically, because any criticism of Trump from someone who is already holding office and is a Republican, he will shrug off as criticism from so-called establishment Republicans, and he'll use it to his advantage. But I think there have to be some prominent voices in the GOP saying, as Paul Ryan has said, this is not what we stand for.
Hadley, it strikes me, my impression the day after when I was seeing the heat that Nikki Haley was getting on Twitter, I just found it so interesting. For months, I have seen people on Twitter sort of mocking the GOP establishment for not doing anything about Trump. Like, you can't do anything about this guy. You guys are just rolling over. You have no answers for Donald Trump, blah, blah, blah. That's the narrative. The day after Nikki Haley gives the GOP response, I can't believe the GOP sent Nikki Haley out there to attack Donald Trump. And I'm thinking, well, now wait a minute. You can't have this both ways. You can't complain that we don't attempt to do anything about Trump. And then on the other hand, these are the same people, on the other hand, criticizing Nikki Haley as an attempt to do something about Trump.
Right.
It's just kind of weird. There's this whole faction in the conservative world right now, the outrage caucus, I think, as we called it last week, that cannot be satisfied no matter what you do. Nikki Haley, they'll find something else to criticize if she hadn't gone after Trump. I'm just pretty convinced there are people who are pretty closed-minded on the issue. They just know what they want.
Some Republican friends of mine who also do not, support Donald Trump as their first choice have said of Governor Haley's speech, I appreciate what she said, but I didn't think that this was the right venue or the right outlet to criticize a GOP primary contender. On the other hand, I think it was one of the most watched speeches from a prominent Republican, especially by viewers who don't necessarily call themselves Republicans. In contrast to the president's speech, which I think was mostly a speech to Democrats, to his own party, I think Governor Haley's speech was a speech to the entire nation. And it was particularly meant to be appealing to people who don't typically consider themselves Republicans or conservatives. It was an outreach message. And I think that's exactly what the GOP needs to be doing.
Right.
I think it's unwise of Democrats to turn into themselves. This is how they won in 2008 with outreach, by saying, we're post-partisan, we're about unity, we're about, not if our government is too big or too small, but if it works, we're about pragmatism. And all those things really resonated with a lot of voters, hope and change, And so the GOP, I think, is learning this lesson as the out party, not having held the White House for 8 years, that if we want to have the White House again, we have to be inclusive. We have to do the outreach. We won the white vote pretty hard with Mitt Romney. It wasn't for lack of white people voting that Mitt Romney isn't the president. It's because we fail so miserably in other demographic categories. And I think Nikki Haley understands that. A lot of Republicans understand that. But it's going to be a challenge, depending on who the nominee is, to see if the GOP can win voters outside of our traditional base.
And it's a particularly challenging task, Hadley, this year, because so many voters on the right are not into outreach. They are into anger. They're into outrage and
revenge.
And revenge sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And so any sound of outreach sounds like you're a squish. You're not principled. Yeah. You're a rhino. Yeah. You don't really believe it. And so how is somebody going to be able to do outreach while retaining, the base? Right. I'm really glad I'm not one of the candidates right now. I don't know the solution to that.
When did speaking in a tone and using particular language that appeals to people who aren't already singing in the conservative choir, when did that make someone any less of a conservative? That's what's truly maddening about this election year, is that simply because someone, whether it's a governor, a senator, or someone who is a messenger for conservative principles, if they use language or if they use a tone that is inclusive, that is outreaching, somehow they are less of a conservative because they don't use an angry tone, because they don't use an exclusive tone. That's a huge problem.
Yeah, you've just put your finger on the divide between Ted Cruz voters and Marco Rubio voters.
A little bit.
That is the divide. Really, Ted is not. He's not an inclusive kind of. That's just not his rhetoric. He's quite divisive in the rhetoric, and Marco takes a very sunny, optimistic kind of, hey, we're looking forward to the new American century, and everybody's coming along with me, right? It's all very open, it's open arms.
Yeah. I wish that we did have more time today to talk about that David Brooks column about the brutalism of Ted Cruz, but I know we don't have all the time to spend talking about the GOP primary. Our listeners may be fatigued of this topic.
For our viewers, we are trying to, since this is now going to be a weekly podcast, we are trying to keep it under 2 hours. Okay.
We could have a special GOP, like we could do a special GOP sometime, like just do nothing but talk about the GOP. And
I think we should start talking about about the presidential race when votes start getting cast. Okay, when primaries are actually going on, we're gonna have plenty of time to be talking about politics, aren't we?
Let's not dive into the hype. Okay, so moving on to, we're going to get off of politics a little bit, sort of, and move on to some world news. We do have your favorite game of wit, coming up a little bit later on in the show. In fact, that'll be coming up next after this next topic. Cologne, Germany. It was a cold, rainy New Year's evening in Cologne, Germany's central train station. Normally, only those traveling at the station would likely be going from the annual fireworks display to a nightclub. This night, New Year's Eve 2015, a group of more than 1,000 men began gathering. Under the shadow of the famous Cologne Cathedral, the men of Arab or North African appearance surrounded the women at the station, groped them, violated them, and stole their belongings. Cologne police are currently investigating 379 criminal complaints, about 40% involving allegations of sexual abuse. The Wire Service, Associated Press, earlier noted 2 allegations of rape. The controversy, Hadley and Brian, obviously is still ongoing. Out of everything we probably talked about today or last week, this is the one thing that consistently comes through my mainstream stock news headlines, something relating to this issue. What are some of the questions and discussions, and is this issue going to go away anytime soon?
Hadley, what do you think? She
I just
doesn't
have
know.
I have to hold back some of my feelings of disgust about this because it's really vomit worthy. It's really just disgusting to think about the brutality and the ugliness and the fallenness and the brokenness that we saw at work in Cologne. I mean, just to think that some people have tried to call Western cultures like what was traditionally Europe and today's United States culture, they've tried to use terms like war on women or rape culture addressing our culture, and then you see something like this happen and you think, no, this is what a rape culture looks like. This is exactly what a rape culture looks like, that so many men would take advantage of so many women in a public place.
Flagrantly.
And that there would not be, I think, okay, I'm about to sound like an anti-feminist, but I think we've got
That's really okay on Dead Reckoning.
We've got to understand as women that, if men all across the world wanted to, they could make us their victims. It is only because of good men that we don't see this happening more often. And it's only because some cultures have advanced to a place where many men recognize that this is not acceptable and they will defend us. They will be our defenders, our protectors, our providers. They will be on the side of women. And unfortunately in Cologne, if there were any men like that there were not enough of them, and it just breaks my heart, honestly, to think of what these women experience, because they'll carry that with them for a long time. And that's not even getting to the question of the refugee situation and the racial tension and the blame game and the responses from the government. But just the personal experience of these women has to be, something that they'll carry for quite some time.
I think that you really got at the heart of the issue, Hadley, when you mention that kind of culture we're talking about in Europe. This is a civilization that was built by the Judeo-Christian tradition. Notions of the dignity of women, responsibilities of men, chivalry, men being to protect the dignity of women. We take these things for granted. We continue to take them for granted even today as we continue to live off of the leftover oxygen of Christendom or the Judeo-Christian civilization. What we saw on New Year's Eve in Cologne was really a sign, and it was a sign of the collapse of that civilization. You see, in Europe for a couple of centuries, we've seen the decline of this Judeo-Christian ethic. We have had more and more. You can only talk about.
I was having some staffing problems maybe a month ago. We're still having.
You can only talk about relativism and making tolerance the chief primary virtue in your culture. You can only do that for so long before it starts paying off. And what we had here is a mass rape of women outside a train station in Germany, for crying out loud. And the first reaction of the authorities was to downplay it out of embarrassment, downplay it because we don't want to be, appear culturally superior. You see all of the virtues of postmodernity are coming home to roost in the old world. And I don't think Europe has it within itself to really combat this. And so I think that this sort of thing is going to get worse before it gets better. This is a civilizational struggle at the end of the day. Are we going to preserve the institutions built by centuries of the Judeo-Christian tradition? Institutions like, the criminal justice system for one, but institutions like how men treat women, chivalry. How are we going to preserve those things, or are they going to crumble?
You know, it reminds me of that. I think I posted it on one of our work channels earlier today about the article about the gal who got out of a relationship and decided, I'm free now that I'm not in this relationship to sleep with whomever I want, whenever I want. And she went on a binge for like 6 months, and it like ruined her life. She's like, my thought was, it just doesn't work. You pursue you continue going through life, pursuing your own desires, pursuing what gratifies and fulfills, and it's not God. I'll say it. It's not an ideology built upon a Judeo-Christian foundation, and it falls apart. It completely falls apart. But the issue is ongoing too, because I read a couple days ago about a group of Germans who decided to go around and then start attacking all of the male refugees in the situation. But it's not the only report. This isn't the only report of sexual misconduct in nature, crimes in Europe by men of a similar description. Remember Rotherham, England?
Right, in Rotherham, and it's more a case of turning a blind eye. Remember, in Rotherham, England, there was this, basically this child sex ring of Muslim immigrants in Rotherham, and the police looked the other way for years, out of fear that they're going to get branded bigots and racists. And this is what I mean by not having the kind of backbone needed to confront this civilizational clash. When the police are having to go, because look, what is the worst sin you can commit in the present day Western world? It's to be a racist, right? It's to be a bigot. Well, if that's the number one, the worst thing you can possibly be, you lose your ability to really discriminate, to make moral distinctions. Like I say, relativism erodes everything. It's an acid that is going to corrode the social fabric. I think we're seeing that in Europe, and I think it's probably going to get worse. And Jay, as you mentioned, you're going to see backlash too, and it's going to be messy. I think.
And then the safety and equality of womankind is sacrificed on the altar of multiculturalism, because this was something that the Germans saw coming. This is something that Europe has seen coming. When I was there in Cologne, Germany, just a few months ago, meeting with members of the city council, talking about how they were handling the influx of refugees. And they were concerned then about some cultural differences, how to assimilate the refugees, because there were already reports of sexual abuse in the camps, in the refugee camps, because there you have people from different backgrounds, different countries, mixed. You also don't have this, underlying sense of control and order that would punish wrongdoers and that would root them out. And so the chaos and confusion, the desire to put multiculturalism above everything else, completely changed the moral matrix and completely changed the decision-making process. In the United States, we've taken some refugees, and we continue, I think, to be a country that generally welcomes immigration. I hope that we'll continue to be that kind of country. But we do have limits in terms of the sheer number for a reason. Sometimes when you have just an overwhelming of cultures, because the culture clash really, a lot of it will depend on how many people where, from which background, and whose values will win the day. Because when people come to the United States or to a Western culture like Germany, we hope that they will assimilate to at least some of the cultural values, like equality of the sexes,
Like, don't
And
rape
part of-
somebody? Hello.
Part of the problem is that
I know I'm asking a
there
lot
are
here.
simply so many refugees in some places that there's no sense of order. There's no sense of control. There's no sense that German values will win the day instead of the utter chaos and confusion that comes with a real lack of respect for human life.
It's a good word.
Man, it's going to be...
Well, we'll stay on top of it. We'll
It's
stay
just-
on top of it because it's going to be ongoing, and with the U.S. starting to bring in refugees, where we might very likely start hearing more things coming from our own camps as well.
You know,
So-
I thought that when the great Mark Stein began calling the immigration crisis in Europe an invasion, I thought that his, I really love and admire Mark Stein, but I always felt like that's probably not that helpful, that language. That's like probably pretty over the top. Like, we should probably avoid using that. Man, I don't know that he's wrong anymore after these events in Cologne. This,
Yeah.
1,000 men you gathered? 1,000 men at the train
Right.
station? This is an invasion.
Well, and one more note that I want to make about this topic is that as ugly and obscene as what happened in Cologne, Germany, it's had me thinking a lot about the thousands of men and the thousands of women in countries that we would not call first world, that we would not call Western, and the fears that women must face in those parts of the world every day, not just on New Year's Eve, not just at the train station,
Not
but
just at
always,
night.
every time they go out, and it is true that we do take so much for granted in our relatively safe and secure and respectful kind of culture that we have in the United States. It is such a travesty that so many women in so many parts of the world, this is their experience, not just on a holiday, not just in the midst of one evening in the shadow of the Cologne Cathedral, but it is their life that they live in this kind of fear.
Hadley, I think that's such a great word. I think it needs to be said. It needs to be said more often. I think that perhaps the pushback from this multiculturalism needs to happen by people being willing to say, as I am willing to say right now, some cultures are superior to others. Okay? I know that's just, in our day and age, that hits the ear really bad, right? Oh, cultural superiority, colonialism, it all brings up all these horror stories. I'm sorry to tell you, but some cultures are superior, and superior culture should be defended for the sake of men, women, and children everywhere.
And I think it's important, too, for people who do really value multiculturalism to hear it from people like you and me who are conservatives, that it's not just the rape and assault of German women that bothers us.
Right.
We are just as deeply bothered and concerned by the rape and assault and mistreatment of women in all parts of the world, whatever the color of their skin, whatever religion they practice. It is always heinous and criminal for men to mistreat women in this way. It's just something that has been brought to light more now in a place like Europe that we believed had progressed beyond this point.
Right.
Because we do take it for granted how much humanity has progressed from our natural state, where in the state of nature, men truly do have a lot more power than women do, because of their physical advantage. And I think, we watch movies. I watched Iron Man 2 the other night, and Scarlett Johansson's character beats up about 15 men in one scene. And I thought, this is, perhaps she's a truly exceptional fighter, but it is the exception. It is not the norm that women can defend themselves.
Right.
That is a great word, Hadley. Fantastic word. We'll stay on top of it for you and come back to it as, these things progress. As Brian said, it's probably not going away anytime soon. It's only going to get worse. Today's sponsor, quick shout out to Alliance Defending Freedom for bringing you today's show. We don't have spots yet because for some reason I can't get these two clowns in the studio to actually record them. We'll get there. I promise. I promise.
Next week we'll do it.
And you know what that means? That means it's time for Not the Onion News. Okay? Games of wit. Games of wit and fancy.
We haven't done this one in a while. I'm excited.
We have not
How about
done
you,
this
Hadley?
one in quite a long time.
I don't get excited about these games because I feel like I always lose them.
You don't, though.
You don't lose. You're beating Brian by 1 point.
I think you are.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's what I do. I can make up.
Reality is different than your perception right
make
now,
up the
Hadley. You're
rules.
very good at these games.
All right, guys. How the game works, not the Onion News, is I read 2 headlines. One of them is fake and one of them is true. Brian and Hadley each try to guess which one is fake and which one is true. And since I'm hosting the show, I am not playing. So I always win. It's my own little way of working it. That said, here's the first headline, friends. Woman surprised pizza. Woman was surprised pizza had ham on it after ordering Canadian bacon and sues.
She sues?
Yep.
She didn't know that Canadian bacon is just ham.
Apparently not.
Okay.
Okay, that's headline number 1.
All right.
Woman surprised pizza had ham on it after ordering Canadian bacon and sues. Headline number 2. Woman mortified after buying meal for homeless man only to discover he was an ordinary customer. So, food related. Woman mortified after buying meal for homeless man only to discover he was an ordinary customer. And woman surprised pizza had ham on it after ordering Canadian bacon and sues.
The second one has to be the Onion because it's funny. It's just too funny to be real.
For the record, the Onion has nothing to do with this. Remley usually makes one up.
I am going to say that the second headline, woman is mortified after buying a meal for a homeless person she discovered was a regular customer, is the true headline.
Okay.
Because I simply cannot bring myself to believe that someone would sue a restaurant over ham on a pizza.
You can't?
No, I just can't. I know there's a lot of ludicrous lawsuits, but that one, no, I actually don't believe
That
it.
one is completely...
Don't
I
believe
would
it.
totally believe that
Don't believe
to
it.
actually
It's the
happen.
fake one.
Jerry,
It's the
Jerry,
Onion.
you're in the studio. Would you believe that somebody could sue, that somebody would sue over that?
Yes.
Yep, Jerry says yes.
Uh-huh. Well,
One time a
answer
mother
stands.
sued McDonald's because they offered Happy Meal toys, and she said that the Happy Meal toys were irresistible to her children.
Right?
And that they
I know.
forced her
Listen, you
to
guys,
buy McDonald's
I
for
am trying
them.
to stand athwart our culture of cynicism. I am trying to see good in people here, okay? And you're crushing me here. You're making me cynical. I'm trying not to be
right.
cynical.
So as a wrap, Hadley
Hadley has not guessed yet.
has not
I did guess. I
She
have
did
the
guess.
opposite guess as you.
She's got the
I think
opposite
the
guess as you.
lawsuit is real, and I think the homeless guy thing is just too funny to be true. Because people look like that, especially in Denver. Like people dress like that. and I'm
Homeless
just like,
people all the time? All right.
And I'm like, please put some nice
All right,
clothes.
so we've got a few people online actually guessing now as well.
Okay.
But
What do they say? What do they say? What do they
Well,
say?
so far, Joshua, who also has a pink bow tie on right now, so you're not left out.
Hi, Joshua. Thanks for watching.
You're not left out there. He said the ham is fake and also not kosher because he's Jewish, I guess.
He probably Googled it, so this isn't even fair.
Ham isn't kosher. All right. Poor Jews.
Like bacon is. She ordered bacon, okay?
Poor Jews.
Just tell us. Just tell us
All
what
right,
it
guys.
is, Jay.
The fake one is the woman surprised pizza had ham on it after ordering Canadian bacon and sues.
I win!
See, I lose. I
I'm
lose.
sorry, Hadley. Hadley, I probably would have guessed yours as well.
Well,
So-
you know, that's what separates winners from losers, you know? That's what I got to say. I saw this one...
You
Yeah,
must
but
be.
Brian-
You must be a Donald Trump voter.
I'm gonna remind you, Brian.
When
that
I
people
lose next
watch
time?
our show because of Hadley, not you.
I know. I totally understand. Oh, I saw this great meme on Facebook the other day. It was an ad by PETA, and on the one side it had a cute little pig, and on the other side it had a little puppy, and it said, "If you wouldn't kill and eat this one, why would you this one?" Right? So if you wouldn't kill and eat the puppy, why would you do this to the pig? And somebody put a big banner across the bottom of it and said, "Because puppies aren't filled with delicious bacon."
It's true. So
I thought it was
not
funny.
the Onion News. Guys, Iran detained 10 U.S. soldiers. Elsewhere in the world, you probably have heard. In fact, on the day of President Obama's final State of the Union address, Iranian soldiers boarded and detained 10 American sailors in the Persian Gulf. Reports have wildly conflicted. One of the boats was disabled. This was an assistance program. The sailors would be released immediately. Not quite immediately. The administration insisted that the sailors are being treated very well, as they had guns pointed at their heads. Iran was releasing pictures of them on their knees with their hands behind their heads, and a video of the sailors apologizing to their captors. "Oh, we're so sorry, Mr. Iranian people." Iran even made the female sailor wear a hijab for the video. And then finally yesterday, the 10 sailors were released, and the administration thanked Iran. "Thank you for detaining..." That's like an act of war in some eras of American history.
Yeah.
But we also knew that the New York Times would put a positive spin on all this because, they're good for something, right?
Yeah.
But their headline.
It was shocking.
Their headline, Iran's swift release of U.S. soldiers hailed as a sign of warmer relations. The only warm thing about those relations is the fact that it's in Iran and it's generally hot.
Yeah, Persian Gulf tends
Just
to be a warm climate.
Cut and paste the Department of State's talking points about what happened into
Right.
the New York Times website, and you've got a story.
I'm just baffled at the extent to which our media just accepts spoon-fed, explanations for all of this. At the very same time, the administration is saying that, thank you, Iran, for, treating our sailors very well. Iran is releasing photos of our sailors in
Not
the
being
deck
treated
of a
very
ship
well.
with their hands behind their heads, with guns pointed at them. Is that what you do, Hadley? I mean, listen, my rules for maritime behavior are a little fuzzy, but I'm pretty sure that when you rescue people in a distressed boat, the first thing you do is you make them get on their knees and put their hands behind their head and point a gun at them, right?
Well,
is that what you do when you're rescuing sailors?
Typically, U.S. sailors are armed. Oh, wait a minute.
Well, they were armed. I mean, that's what. There are so many unanswered questions, and this is part of my thing. Is I don't understand how incurious the media is. Right? We have 50 caliber weapons on these boats. Were they told not to defend themselves? Were they told
another
to
Benghazi.
surrender? Were they? I want to know. I want to know what the chain of command is here. Did they say no? You can't defend yourself. Just let yourself be captured and boarded. So Iran. Of course, claims they were in Iranian waters. I mean, Iran thinks the entire Persian Gulf is Iranian waters. So that doesn't surprise me. They captured 2 boats. They ransacked it. They went through. They gathered intel. They learned what they could learn. They interrogated our soldiers. They took humiliating photographs of them. They put them on video apologizing for entering their waters.
Right.
This has all the makings of a very intentional, very premeditated humiliation of the United States Navy and by
Propaganda
extension,
campaign.
Yeah, and by extension, the United States of America, and by even more particular extension, they did this on the day of the President's State of the Union address. That is not a coincidence. It cannot possibly be a coincidence, can it? Okay, nobody has an answer to that.
I'm a conspiracy theorist, so I'm going to say it was not a coincidence at all.
Okay.
The CIA paid the Iranians to gather them up, and
Oh, this is a CIA false flag.
it's always a
operation.
CIA thing.
Listen, I grew up. I grew up during the tenure of a guy by the name of Ronald Wilson Reagan, and I can tell you right now that something like this would have been utterly inconceivable in the 8 years that Ronald Reagan was the president, because he was greatly feared. The Iranians trying something like this would have met a pretty swift response. Number one, I don't think the boats would have surrendered in the first place. But I wonder, I don't know what to say about this. I wonder about, is this a military morale issue? I just don't understand the commander of a boat saying, "Oh, here come the Iranians. Sure, board my boat and take me away." I don't get it. I don't understand what's going on.
Jerry posted on our chat channel. I'm gonna wait for the TV movie to come out before I judge anyone.
The TV made for TV movie.
Hadley, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I don't really know. I'm also just as curious as Brian about the chain of command and about whose call it was to tell our soldiers what to do in this precarious situation they found themselves in. I think the photographs are terrible. The optics of this are terrible. I think they look very bad for the United States, not just between us and Iran, but between us and all of our enemies and all of our allies, among the nations of the entire world. This is not a good look for the United States to have our soldiers on their knees with their hands behind their head at gunpoint from a much inferior country from a military standpoint. So I have to give credit where credit is due. John Kerry certainly tried to make lemonade out of these lemons because he said, look at how great this is that the Iran deal has resulted in our ability to so swiftly get our prisoners, our soldiers released. I thought that was just like the ultimate political spin.
Yeah, right.
Something terrible happens. This looks terrible. And he says, hey, the Iran deal, it's a success. Look at what a success
So in other
it
words,
is.
John Kerry is saying, Iran,
Wow.
thank you for so swiftly resolving the conflict that you created.
This is a West Wing episode.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
just bizarre.
Okay, guys, moving on. Just this morning, the great Alan Rickman died of cancer at age 69. In my world, he was known as Hans Gruber in Die Hard, the sheriff of Nottingham in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. You, 10:30. You, 10:45. And bring a friend.
Well, you have to do it with the Alan Rickman voice. You have to see
You have an Alan Rickman?
You 10:30. You 10:45, and bring a friend.
Sort of. And of course,
Listen, I was better than yours.
of course, the most memorable of all characters, Professor Severus Snape in the Harry Potter series.
One of the greatest heroes in all of literature.
You will not hear me say anything about the death of David Bowie because I just don't really care, honestly.
You just did.
But
You
I
just did.
like.
Now we're gonna get
But
hate
I
mail,
like,
dude.
I like Alan Rickman. This is a bummer.
It is a
liked
bummer. Alan Rickman was
Died
a
of cancer.
great British, both stage and film actor.
Yeah, I've seen in some of these and be like, wow, this guy's just great. It's fun. So
I remember him most, frankly, I do remember him most from the greatest Christmas movie ever made. And of course, that was alongside Bruce Willis in Die Hard.
right.
As Hans Gruber, he was just terrific. He also, Sense and Sensibility with Emma Thompson and Kate Winslet.
Fantastic.
He played Colonel Brandon, which was he did a terrific job at that. He was in Love Actually and played a creepy character that. Well, let's just forget that one.
Okay, so speaking of movies, Oscar nominations are out. Last year, hardly anyone had even seen any of the nominees. This one's a little bit different, but there are some recognizable ones. Here, the nominations for Best Picture are The Big Short, Bridge of Spies, Brooklyn, Mad Max Fury Road, The Martian, The Revenant, Room, and Spotlight.
Boy, there's a bunch of those I haven't even heard of.
The only one I have seen is Mad Max Fury Road, and I saw it like 4 times.
Oh, so you liked it, in other words.
Yes, but I don't think it deserves Best Picture. The one I really want to see on that list was Bridge of Spies, and I didn't get a chance to see it.
Have you seen any of them, Hadley?
Bridge of Spies is also on my want to see list, but the only one of these movies I've actually seen is The Martian, and that's Matt Damon's movie, right, where
Right.
he gets stuck on Mars. It was excellent. I enjoyed it.
Brian and I Brian, remember in DRTV when we were going on about science, because science, it was that whole like Neil deGrasse Tyson was making
Right,
an
right,
uproar
right.
on the world, and everyone's like, because science.
Because science, duh.
So I go see. I think I forget what movie I saw, and the trailer came out.
Oh, for The Martian?
Yeah, and in it, he's like, "I'm gonna science the out of this," and I'm like, "Did
Yeah.
he just say I'm gonna science this?"
Yes.
I just wanted to just face palm myself in the middle of the theater.
He used science as a verb.
Oh man,
He did? He
couldn't-
used science as a verb?
I couldn't.
Yeah.
Oh, I
couldn't
can't see the
do it.
movie now.
Yeah,
but this
can't.
would be like the second movie in 2 years that Matt Damon played an astronaut who went to a far-flung planet. He did that in Interstellar too.
And I hated his character in Interstellar.
Well,
Like,
you
that
were
was
supposed to.
No, I mean, I actually hated the storyline. I thought it ruined the movie for me.
Oh,
Wait,
I disagree.
Matt Damon was in Interstellar?
Didn't you see Interstellar? How did you miss him?
I thought that Matthew McConaughey was in that.
He was, and Matt Damon
was, and Matt
is
Damon.
in Interstellar.
And other guys named Matt.
Oh.
I'm sure there were
So-
other guys named Matt, but those,
All right.
yeah, Matt Damon played
You know,
the scientist. Yeah, okay.
Maybe it's because I'm a woman, but when Matthew McConaughey is in a movie, nobody else really matters.
He is.
He's good.
The guy's great. I thought in Interstellar he was amazing. I mean, he's a great
I
actor.
like most of his movies.
The only movie on this list of Oscar Best Picture nominations that I really am looking forward to seeing, because truthfully I have seen none of them, is The Revenant. And that's because
kinda wanna see that one.
full disclosure, I happen to believe that Leonardo DiCaprio is one of the greatest actors of his generation.
True.
Regardless of what people think of him personally, I think that he absolutely delivers on everything that he does, and he's fabulous. And from the trailers I saw of this film, the filmmaking itself, the cinematography, and what they did with cameras looks unbelievable to me. And so I think this is probably a film we're seeing. Our good friend Brian Godawa highly recommended The Revenant, and he thought it actually,
Really?
yes, and he said it has an amazingly great message.
Because
that-
when he recommends something, it's usually like,
well,
'cause he hardly recommends
he
anything
he was
ever.
actually, Brian was over the top with this film. He said this is a movie about how vengeance is the Lord's, but the Lord is not a
Wow.
pacifist.
Oh, that's a good.
It's about
That actually
it's
would
about
be-
true justice.
That would actually make a good log line for a movie. Revenge is the Lord's.
But
the
God
Lord
isn't a pacifist. So I'm excited to see The Revenant. So anyway, that's the only one that I can see that I really.
You guys don't want
care
to
that
see
much
The Big
about.
Short? I kind of want to see The Big Short.
Every time I see the big anything, I always think of the bowling movie or the one where they're stuck in
The
a
Big
hotel room.
Lebowski.
Which one's the one where
The
they're
Big
stuck
Short?
in They're stuck in a
Yeah.
hotel room. Which one is that one?
I don't know, you talking about The Big Lebowski? Are you thinking of the Coen brothers?
I just get them all confused in my head.
Well, The Big Short, I hear is entertaining. Of course,
Tons of star power in that movie. I mean,
but
the
not
cast
half of
is
these.
like-
Half of these aren't even out yet. Like,
well, The Big
and
Short.
we live in Billings. I mean, Hadley, you have a better
Uh.
chance of seeing some of these because you live in Denver. But they just don't
Yeah.
even. They don't even open here.
I read an article about the movie Room, which sounded like it was just going to be far too sad for me to see, but it's about a young woman who's taken captive in somebody's like garage shed or something for years and years
I
of her
don't want
life.
to
and
watch
she's
that.
abused, and then she becomes pregnant, and then she has this child who lives his life inside of this room. And then one day they escape, and then I think the movie's supposed to be positive and supposed to be happy about this child who discovers life outside of the room. But I just thought the premise was too sad for me.
This
to spend
sounds-
time
I can't
dwelling,
handle it. It's
dwelling on
sounds-
such a sad situation.
This sounds terrible.
You know, that's just too real world. You know,
I
that
know.
earlier, or just last year, it was just several months ago, the FBI finally closed an investigation on a man in Billings, Montana, who had a dungeon, built a dungeon in his basement. And they actually, I mean, the undercover agent, I cannot imagine how, I really thank God for these people. The undercover FBI agents who have to deal with the absolute scum of humanity. So she was going to help him buy 2 slaves. And
Oh my goodness.
they actually went so far as to get him
Sex-
to
we're
travel.
talking sex slaves?
Sex slaves. He had a dungeon in his basement. And they actually got him to travel to Arizona, where he was going to purchase 2 slaves. He had chains in the car to chain them up and all this stuff.
Oh my
so they
gosh.
but they have to build to build a federal case against somebody. You have to have them actually commit overt actions and cross state lines to do it. So you have this undercover agent who's working this case. Can you imagine what that's like? This man was a barbarian.
This guy obviously doesn't watch enough to realize that if you want a sex slave, you got to treat him well.
Oh no, he was going to chain him up. It was just disgusting.
No.
But anyway, your mentioning of the premise of Room just makes me like, I don't want to see this movie.
here's
Are
the-
you kidding
know.
me?
Remley
It's
did
just too
say
sad.
Remley did say it was based on a true story.
Yeah.
So,
Not
'Cause that's
everything
the world
true
we live
needs
in.
to be seen.
well, it's like if you ever watch, if you
Well.
ever go to like see the independent film festivals, and I've gone to a few of them, the movies are just weird. Like, why do you make this stuff? Like, I don't understand why you want to bring this kind of dark madness into the world. Anyway, so guys, let's all go see Bridge of Spies, or I don't even think it's out yet. Let's see
The
Bridge of
Revenant.
Spies when we can.
The Revenant.
Is that out still?
It just came out last week.
Came out? Let's
On
go see
Friday,
it.
I think.
Let's go see it. It'd be great. We can go tonight. Jerry and I can go tonight.
Cool.
That said, that closes our show, and we're at 59:58, so we're
Sweet.
right at an hour, and I hope it was okay for you guys. Send us your feedback and comments to hello@deadreckoning.tv.
If you want another half hour, let us know.
Yeah, if you want the whole hour and a half. But we're
Tell
trying.
us if you like us in color or if you prefer us in black and white.
That's right.
The
Right.
color was just
Five-
too much for you.
5 stars on iTunes. 5
5,
stars.
something like that, or 4. 4
Or
works.
whatever you think we deserve.
Follow us on Dead Reckoning at D Reckoning TV on Twitter, Dead Reckoning on Facebook. Hadley.
Follow me at Hadley Heath on Twitter. And I encourage you to check out my employer, the organization, the Independent Women's Forum. I don't speak for them here, but they're an excellent organization. They do free markets and personal liberty for women.
And they give Hadley to us free of their own accord, so thank them for that. Brian.
You can find me on Twitter at Brian G. Matson. You can find my webpage at drdrbrianmatson.com. I also have a public Facebook page, Dr. Brian G. Matson, where you can like my page, follow me on Twitter, but don't troll me, bro.
Troll him. Troll him hard.
I'll just ignore you. I'll block you.
Rickroll him.
Don't
Give him the music video.
Rick roll me.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dead Reckoning Radio. Don't forget to subscribe to us in your favorite podcast player, your favorite podcast, wherever you do that. So rate us on iTunes. Thank you to our sponsor, Alliance Defending Freedom, adflegal.org, for their support of our show. And creds to Remley Gorsuch, one of our producers on the show, myself, and this new software that's actually not too bad. I'm kind of digging it. So that said, if you have a hankering, jump online and send us a few bucks. www.deadreckoning.tv. That said, I'm Jay Friesen.
I'm Brian Matson.
I'm Hadley Heath.
And this has been Dead Reckoning Radio.